My name is Journey, and I used to believe that loyalty always paid off. For 15 years I worked at the same company, a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Chicago. I started as a shy intern, barely knowing how to use Excel, and somehow worked my way up to a senior operations coordinator. Every morning my day began the same way. The smell of fresh coffee filling my small kitchen. My cat, Milo, rubbing against my legs as I tied my hair into a bun. I'd glance at the clock, 7:45 a.m. sharp, grab my bag, and step into the familiar rhythm of the city. Car horns, footsteps, snippets of small talk from neighbors. At work, people used to call me the backbone of the office. I kept track of everything: reports, project timelines, even the little details everyone else ignored. But over time things changed. The company grew and so did the egos. A new manager, Samantha, was brought in about a year ago. She was young, sharp, and ambitious, the kind of woman who wore power suits and spoke like every word was a command. First I admired her confidence, but soon admiration turned into quiet tension. She didn't like that I knew the systems better than she did. I remember one morning, she walked up to my desk with that perfect fake smile. "Samantha. Journey, could you send me the client summary? I think you misplaced the numbers again." Me. "Actually, the report's already updated. Check your inbox." Samantha. "Oh, well, make sure it doesn't happen next time." I forced a polite smile, but inside I knew what was coming. She was starting to paint me as careless. At lunch, my coworkers whispered about the new restructure. I brushed it off. I'd been there longer than anyone else. Surely my loyalty meant something. But that illusion shattered the day the director scheduled a meeting. The entire department was invited. No context. Just one cryptic email titled, "Performance and Accountability Discussion." That was the moment everything began to unravel. I didn't know it then, but that meeting would change the way I saw everyone, and everything I thought I knew about loyalty. The meeting room was freezing. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner cutting through the silence. Samantha sat at the head of the table, a perfect picture of calm authority. Around her were my teammates, people I'd shared coffee with, birthdays and late-night deadlines. The director walked in, glanced around, and said, "We're here to discuss some serious issues regarding project mismanagement." My stomach dropped. Then Samantha stood up. Her tone was clipped, rehearsed. "With all due respect, Mr. Davis, we've noticed consistent errors in reporting, delays, data mismatches, and communication failures. Most of them trace back to Journey's department." I froze. My name echoed across the room like a slap. Me? That's not true. Samantha. "Journey, please. We have the numbers right here." She clicked the projector, and suddenly the screen filled with highlighted rows, mistakes, red circles, and bold text. But I knew what I was seeing. They weren't my errors. The documents had been edited. I turned toward my coworkers, waiting for anyone to speak up. But all I saw were blank faces, eyes avoiding mine. My hands trembled under the table. 15 years. And this was how it ended? Director Davis. "Journey, this is disappointing. After your years of service, I expected more professionalism." His words hit harder than I thought they would. That night I went home numb. I replayed the meeting in my head again and again. Milo curled beside me as I sat staring at my laptop screen, scrolling through emails, documents, and audit trails. I couldn't sleep. Not after realizing what I saw. Hidden in the metadata I found the original files with timestamps. Files that proved I'd been set up. Samantha and her little circle had been editing reports after submission, and blaming me for the inconsistencies. I should have been furious. Instead I felt calm. Because for the first time in weeks I wasn't confused anymore. I had proof. And by morning I knew exactly what I was going to do. That night I sat alone in my small apartment, the city lights flickering through the half-closed blinds. The clock ticked past midnight, but sleep was a stranger. My laptop screen glowed faintly, reflecting my tired eyes that had seen too much betrayal for one day. I kept scrolling through the files, cross-referencing timestamps, emails, attachments. Every click confirmed it. Samantha had been doctoring my reports, and others had helped her. My so-called team, the same people who once thanked me for staying late to cover their tasks, had quietly stabbed me in the back. At one point I just stopped. My hands hovered over the keyboard, shaking. I whispered into the quiet, Why me? What did I ever do to deserve this? Milo jumped onto the table, his small head pressing against my wrist as if trying to comfort me. I buried my face in my palms. My chest felt heavy like there was a stone pressing down on it. The humiliation from the meeting replayed again. The director's disappointed face, the silence from my colleagues, the smug expression Samantha tried to hide. And for the first time in 15 years I cried. Not the quiet, dignified kind, but the kind that comes from deep inside, raw and unfiltered. Tears hit the keyboard as I whispered. I gave them everything. I thought of all the birthdays I skipped, the weekends I worked, the times I stayed at the office until midnight while others laughed at happy hour. I thought loyalty meant protection. That dedication was armor. But now I realized, in the corporate world, loyalty is only valuable until you become inconvenient. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional passing car outside. I wiped my face, but the ache didn't fade. My inbox was still open, showing the meeting summary Samantha had sent to the director. Cold, clinical words accusing me of careless oversight. For a fleeting moment I wanted to quit. To just send my resignation, walk away, disappear. But then I saw the photo taped to my desk. Me and my late father at my graduation. He was the one who'd taught me that dignity isn't given. It's earned. He used to say, "Journey, you don't let people write your story for you." I stared at that picture for a long time. My tears slowly stopped. My breathing evened out. And somewhere between exhaustion and rage, a quiet realization surfaced. They wanted me broken. They wanted me silent. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I whispered to myself almost like a vow. You want a story, Samantha? Fine. I'll write the ending myself. The next morning I showed up to work early, earlier than anyone else. The office was still dark, the smell of fresh carpet cleaner lingering in the air. I sat at my desk and opened a new email draft. My fingers hesitated above the keyboard. This wasn't going to be a rant or an emotional outburst. This was going to be surgical, precise, documented. Before typing, I took a deep breath and opened the folder I'd created overnight. Proof of tampering. Inside were screenshots, original files, audit trails, and version histories, each timestamped and verified. I wasn't ready to send it yet. Not until I was sure. Because I wanted to make sure when I finally exposed them, there would be no escape. But even as I planned my next move, a part of me still hurt deeply. I still passed by their desks that morning, still forced a smile, still said good morning while knowing what they'd done. The irony burned. Samantha gave me that same fake grin. Journey, I hope you've had time to reflect after yesterday. Her voice was sweet poison. I smiled back. Oh, I did. More than you think. She didn't notice the flash drive in my hand. That evening when I got home, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window. The city was quiet again, but inside me something had shifted. I wasn't the same woman who cried herself to sleep the night before. I was calm, focused, because pain had turned into clarity, and clarity was power. And I knew that soon Samantha and her little circle would understand what happens when you push the wrong woman too far. The next few days I became invisible. I spoke less, smiled when necessary, and took mental notes of everything. The office buzzed as usual. Phones ringing, printers humming, the faint smell of burnt coffee lingering near the break room. But inside me there was a storm brewing, cold and calculated. Samantha thought she had one. She walked around like a queen, heels clicking confidently on the marble floor, her voice carrying that rehearsed authority. My coworkers followed her lead, pretending they were too busy to look me in the eye. That was fine. Let them think I was broken. Let them underestimate me. I knew that revenge wasn't about shouting or proving them wrong in public. It was about precision, about choosing the right moment when silence becomes your weapon. So I started digging quietly, methodically. Every night after work, I stayed behind under the pretense of fixing reports. Once the office emptied, I would log into the shared server, tracing file histories, downloading emails, and capturing internal chat logs. And the deeper I dug, the uglier it got. I found messages between Samantha and her two allies, Chris and Monica, mocking me. We'll make her look incompetent enough to push her out. Once Journey's gone, we can shift the blame and get those bonuses. My hands tightened into fists as I read. The laughter emojis at the end of their messages made my stomach twist. They weren't just ambitious, they were cruel. But something about reading their words gave me a strange kind of peace. Because now, I didn't just have suspicions, I had evidence. That weekend, I spent hours crafting the perfect email to the director. I wasn't going to make emotional claims. I wasn't going to sound like a victim. I was going to sound professional, measured, and undeniably factual. The subject line read, "Clarification regarding recent performance allegations. Supporting evidence attached." Inside I wrote, "Dear Mr. Davis, I'd like to provide clarity on the recent concerns raised during our department's performance review. Attached are verified versions of reports, audit logs, and communication records that demonstrate alterations made post-submission. Please review the timestamps and message threads for context. Respectfully, Journey." But before sending it, I paused. Timing was everything. If I sent it too soon, they'd have time to cover their tracks. Too late, and the damage would deepen. So I waited. I spent the next few days gathering more call summaries, internal memos, even meeting notes from clients that proved I had delivered accurate data long before Samantha's corrections. I also began subtly setting the stage in conversations. In the break room, when Chris bragged about their presentation updates, I smiled and said softly, "It's amazing how audit logs show who edits what, isn't it?" He froze for a moment before laughing awkwardly. That was all I needed. Fear had entered the room, quietly, invisibly. The next day, Samantha called me into her office. "Samantha. Journey, I noticed you've been working late. Trying to fix old mistakes, I hope." "Me? Something like that," I replied calmly. "Samantha. Good. I like to see initiative." "Me? You will." Her smile wavered. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. The email draft was ready. Attachments labeled, evidence sorted. I added one final document. A PDF summary detailing every instance of data manipulation tied to Samantha's login credentials. Then I added a CC, HR department, and BCC, legal compliance team. I didn't hit send yet. Instead, I saved it as a draft and stared out the window. The sky outside was dark and still. Somewhere in that silence, I thought of all the people like me, loyal employees who kept their heads down, believing hard work spoke for itself. It didn't. In corporate survival, silence wasn't noble. It was dangerous. And so I whispered to myself, tomorrow the silence ends. When I walked into the office the next morning, I felt strangely calm. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake. Felt like walking toward closure. At exactly 10 a.m., I hit send. The email flew out like a quiet bullet, clean, precise, unstoppable. Then I stood up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and went back to my desk as if nothing had happened. An hour later, the office buzz began to shift. Samantha got a call from the director's assistant. Her face drained of color. She forced a smile, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. Chris and Monica exchanged worried glances. Whispered conversations erupted near the printer. And I just kept working. Typing, sipping coffee, pretending not to hear a thing. By noon, I got the company-wide memo. All department heads are required to attend an emergency meeting at 2 p.m. Please bring your recent project documentation for review. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I smiled to myself as I closed my laptop. The stage was set. And for once, I wasn't the one being cornered, they were. The clock struck 2 p.m. I could feel the tension before I even stepped into the conference room. The atmosphere was thick. No one spoke, no one made eye contact. The faint hum of the air conditioner seemed louder than ever. The director, Mr. Davis, sat at the head of the long mahogany table. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, they were cold, focused. Next to him sat the HR manager and a representative from the compliance team, both taking notes, both avoiding small talk. Samantha entered the room a few seconds later, wearing her signature confidence like armor. High heels, red lipstick, a folder clutched tightly in her manicured hands. Chris and Monica trailed behind her, visibly nervous. I took my usual seat, third from the end. My heart beat slow and steady. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared. Mr. Davis. Thank you for coming, everyone. There have been some developments regarding recent project discrepancies. Samantha smiled tightly. Samantha. I'm glad we're addressing this, sir. It's been a recurring issue. He cut her off. Mr. Davis. Sit down, Samantha. I think you'll want to hear this first. The HR manager adjusted her glasses and opened a thick folder. HR manager. We received an email this morning from Journey, containing timestamped records, file versions, and chat logs regarding the alleged errors. The data has been verified. Samantha's smile faltered. Samantha. I'm not sure I understand. HR manager. According to the evidence, multiple documents were edited post-submission under your login credentials, and those of your subordinates, Chris and Monica. A murmur rippled across the table. Chris sank lower in his chair. Monica's eyes darted nervously. Samantha looked stunned, but it was the kind of shock that came from being caught, not from innocence. Mr. Davis. Samantha, do you have any explanation for this? Her voice wavered slightly. Samantha. There must be some mistake. Maybe someone used my login. I couldn't help it. I let out a small laugh. Soft but sharp enough to slice through the silence. Me funny. Because the chat logs attached show you admitting to the edits. Mr. Davis turned toward me. Mr. Davis. Journey, you've been quiet. Would you like to say something? I took a breath. My voice was calm, almost detached. Me? I've worked here for 15 years, sir. I've never missed a deadline. Never falsified data. What happened last week was a setup, and I wasn't going to defend myself with words. I let the evidence speak instead. Samantha's face turned pale. Samantha. You're twisting this. HR manager. Enough. We've confirmed everything. We even traced the server logs. The edits came from your office computer at 10:47 p.m., 2 days before submission. A silence followed, deep and suffocating. Then Mr. Davis closed his folder with a decisive snap. Mr. Davis. Samantha, you're suspended effective immediately pending further investigation. Chris, Monica. You'll surrender your system access and cooperate fully. Chris stammered something about misunderstanding, but Mr. Davis wasn't listening. He turned to me. His tone softened, almost regretful. Mr. Davis. Journey, I owe you an apology. I should have looked deeper before allowing that meeting to happen. You've been one of our most reliable employees. We'll make this right. For a moment I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, relief. Samantha stood up abruptly, her voice trembling between anger and desperation. Samantha. This is ridiculous. You're taking her side because she's been here longer. Mr. Davis. I'm taking the side of the truth. And with that, she was escorted out. As the door shut behind her, the room exhaled. Monica started crying quietly. Chris looked like he might throw up. I simply gathered my notes, placed them neatly into a folder, and stood. Me. If you'll excuse me, I have real work to get back to. When I walked past Samantha's now empty desk an hour later, I felt nothing. No gloating. No triumph. Just calm. Like the storm had finally passed. The next morning, my email pinged with a new message from Mr. Davis. Subject. Appreciation for integrity and diligence. Journey. Thank you for your professionalism throughout this issue. Your dedication and conduct are exemplary. We'll be discussing a new position for you soon. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I smiled. In the break room, people who once avoided me now offered polite greetings. Some looked guilty. Some whispered apologies. But I didn't need them. Because I wasn't the same woman they tried to humiliate in that meeting. I had found something stronger than revenge, respect for myself. Still, as I poured my coffee and looked out the window, I couldn't help but think back to that moment when I hit send. That quiet, powerful instant where everything changed. Revenge hadn't been about destroying them. It had been about taking my voice back. And as I sipped my coffee watching the sunrise glow over the city, I realized something. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's silent, smart, and perfectly timed. The day of the live broadcast arrived, the grand corporate charity gala. Cameras, lights, reporters, the entire city was watching. Michael, now calm and sharp, stood backstage in a black suit. His comeback was complete, but this was the final act, the one that would make Ethan's mask crumble in front of everyone. Ethan strutted on stage, his arrogant grin fixed, thanking sponsors, pretending to be the visionary CEO who rebuilt the company. The audience clapped. The board smiled. No one knew what was coming. Then Michael's name was announced as guest speaker of the night. The crowd gasped. Ethan froze. Michael walked to the podium with quiet authority. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady, resonant. "Tonight we're celebrating integrity, but integrity means truth. And sometimes truth is buried under lies." He clicked the remote. The giant screen behind him came alive. Security footage, email records, voice recordings. One by one, Ethan's betrayal, fraud, and corruption played before hundreds of witnesses and thousands watching live. The crowd went silent. Reporters started whispering. Ethan tried to interrupt, shouting, "This is manipulation. Lies." But Michael turned to him with a calm, devastating smile. "You once told me I was replaceable, Ethan. But let me remind you, integrity is not." Ethan's face drained of color. Security stepped closer. Board members looked furious. Within minutes, Ethan was escorted off stage, humiliated, exposed, destroyed. The cameras stayed on Michael. The host hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Carter, do you have any final words?" Michael nodded slightly. "Yes. To everyone who's ever been betrayed or cast aside, don't seek revenge with hate. Seek it with truth. Because truth doesn't just burn bridges. It burns empires built on lies." The audience erupted in applause. For the first time in years, Michael smiled. Not in triumph but peace. Justice had finally been served, and this time the world saw the truth unfold live. Weeks passed since the night the truth shattered the illusion. The video of Ethan's downfall went viral, millions of views, countless comments. Words like karma, justice, finally exposed filled every corner of the internet. The company's stock plummeted, but the trust in Michael soared. He didn't stay to watch the empire burn. Instead, he quietly resigned. His job was never to destroy, it was to reveal. Now Michael lived far from the city, in a small coastal town where the sound of the ocean replaced the constant noise of ambition. Every morning he'd walk along the beach, coffee in hand, letting the waves wash away what remained of his past. One afternoon his phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, the colleague who had once been silent during Ethan's betrayal. "You did it, Michael. You made us believe again. The company is rebuilding. The right way this time." Michael smiled faintly, typing back, "Good. Make sure it stays that way. Justice only matters when we learn from it." He put the phone away, gazing out at the horizon. The sun was setting, gold bleeding into the sea, calm, endless. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't known since before the betrayal: peace. The narrator's voice would fade in, deep and reflective. In a world where power often silences truth, one man dared to speak it, and in doing so reminded us all that revenge isn't about destruction, it's about restoration. Because sometimes the loudest victory is silence after justice. The screen would fade to black. A soft piano note would linger, and on the final frame white text would appear. Truth always finds its way.